Nick Thorner, joining us today. And if you don't know Nick, I think Nick has spoken at an LTOP before, but if you don't know Nick, Nick is a teacher and a writer based at King's Education in Oxford. He's worked as a teacher trainer in several countries, most notably Italy, and has many years of experience preparing students from all around the world for IELTS exams and UK university courses. Nick has written and co-authored several books for OUP, including the teacher resource book called Motivational Teaching and the course IELTS Foundation Masterclass. Most recently, he's contributed a chapter about demotivation to the Palgrave Handbook for Motivation for Language Learning. Writing a chapter on demotivation, is that motivating in itself or demotive? Anyway.
On that one.
So our final speaker of this blog, everybody please welcome Nick Thorner to tell us about a motivating vision of language learning. So Nick, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sean. And hello to all of you. It's different time zones, isn't it? But it's great to be with you. And thanks so much for staying the course to the final session of the blog. I hope you've had a great time so far. So let's get started. The objective today really is to explore how we can motivate students by getting them to change their way of seeing themselves, not simply as learners that are empty receptacles of learning, but instead as agents in the learning process. After that, we're going to look at some practical ideas on how we can actually do it. So we'll start off by looking at perhaps a few types of student that we might be familiar with. So if I move on to the next slide. Here we go. Right, 10 motivational challenges. Now, these are basically from my own experience, 10 types of student, or let's say motivational challenges that students face. Instead of studying, they feel the need to do perhaps one of 10 things. Now, we're going to go through these one by one. And as we do, I would like you to try and imagine a student that fits the description. Okay. Now, at the end of this, I'm going to ask you which one was the easiest to imagine. All right. We'll do a little poll. Okay. Are you ready? So the first motivational challenge, the student who actually wants to study, but not do what you want them to do. So this is a student who has their own way of doing it. Maybe it's through gaming or through, I don't know, traveling or whatever, self-study, practice tests, whatever. But they don't want to do what you want to do. The student who just wants to have fun. Maybe they know that English is important for them one day, but for now, they're not motivated. Their priorities are to relate to other students. They get distracted easily. The student who has other priorities right now. So this could be a student who maybe is into sport, math, something where we don't think of English as being essential. And so they're motivated to do other things at the moment instead of English. The student who's motivated to act cool, perhaps, wants to stay connected with all his friends, doesn't want to do what the teacher says. Oh, save face. Yeah, the student who feels that if they try and do anything, they'll just look stupid. And so they're not going to try. The student who doesn't fit into the school environment, feels overwhelmed by it and by the demands that we often place on students. He just wants to get out of there. And I think related to that, the student who feels that the school doesn't care about them or the teacher doesn't care about them, doesn't understand them, and they just want to disrupt. Next one. The student who doesn't really think they're good enough, that will never make progress, and so doesn't want to try. This is an interesting one, which I stumbled across last year. A student who wants to do everything I tell them to do, but isn't really interested in the actual learning process. This was a student who said to me, after I'd sort of gone through loads of stuff on the board, did you want me to write any of that down? I was like, yeah, that would be great. but they didn't sort of respond to feedback very much, or do their corrections, or really take part in the learning behaviours that you want to see, but they're very keen to please you. And finally, the student who feels like they've done it all before, certainly the present perfect perhaps, think, oh, it's the 6th time we've learned it, well, haven't we all? And feels that there's nothing new, nothing worth them doing anymore. Okay, there we go. That's our 10 challenges. So I'm going to ask you to let me know a little bit now what you think was the easiest to imagine. Which of those prompts created a picture in your mind of a student most easily? So if we go and click on the poll, and can we get the poll up? There we go, perfect. And I think, can we do one option or 2 options? Let's have a look. I think it's just one. So choose the one. Right. Okay. I'll just give one more minute to people to have a think, or a few more seconds. Okay, 10 more seconds. Oh dear. Looking at, I can see the results here. Can we get the results on the screen, or perhaps? Yeah, okay, fantastic. So it's quite a lot actually, and I can't actually see it at the bottom of my screen now, but I can see the results anyway. And we do have a clear winner, which is disruptive behaviour. 18% of you said that the biggest challenge you have is students that feel motivated to kind of disrupt things. Isn't that a shame? It shows how difficult our job is, doesn't it? How do you deal with that? We will try and come up with some ideas later, but that's brilliant. The next closest is just having fun as well. Students who just want to, be with friends, have a laugh, share messages, whatever, catch up. All right, and I think all the others a little bit further down. Interesting that lots of people have said just learn their way. They don't need you. There's so much opportunity these days to learn English online. Perhaps they feel, what's the point in learning with us? Okay, brilliant. And then disengaging as well. Students that feel they've done it before, there's no point. They don't like the tasks that you design. Okay, thank you so much for sharing your views. Now, let's have a quick think then about why these challenges are happening, what's happening in the minds of students. And I'm going to turn to self-determination theory to give us a frame to help us understand this. And the 3 key words in motivation theory: competence, being good at something; autonomy, feeling in control; and relatedness, feeling connected with other people. And I'm going to ask you to read that quote on the right, which to me is the most important sentence I've ever read when studying, motivation. So I think all of the challenges that we've looked at can be understood through this lens. And I'm going to show you what I mean. Very often, I think we forget this as teachers. We want to be nice, but we are actually a threat to our students. We are threatening them. We are threatening their sense of autonomy, their sense of relatedness by making them be not cool, and their sense of competence by always testing them, which we have to do. But that is a consequence of our profession. Sometimes I think we get students whose needs are already in deficit because of home life or because of past experiences in school, and they come into the classroom and it doesn't really matter what you do, their needs are already sort of in deficit. They already have significant issues, and so they're more sensitive to the classroom environment and more prone to disrupting. And it sounds like that's the challenge that a lot of us are facing: needs deficits. There are also the students who don't see how learning can help them meet these needs of being competent. Maybe that could be short term on the right, no opportunity to meet needs now. Or it could be in the long term. They don't see where it's going to take them. And finally, this is equally important, I think we forget this one, students who have better ways of meeting those needs than sitting in our classrooms. This could be, I think as we've said before, students who perhaps understand, they know that English is good for their needs, but there's just better ways of feeling autonomous, feeling competent. Okay. So what I'd like to emphasize then, I think this is the starting point of this session really, is that needs can't wait. All right. There's no point in telling a student 10 years time, you're going to be so glad you did this exercise here that I'm giving you now. It won't work. It won't work if in the classroom right now, they see a barrier to feeling in control or to feeling competent or to feeling related. Now, that's not to say the future isn't important. We do have to help them create an image of themselves in the future as users of English who are fulfilled, competent, related with other people, and autonomous. But it's the present that really motivates. And the learning experience, that the journey that we take students on, has to be the best available opportunity for meeting those needs now. If it isn't, I think we're wasting our time. So what we need to transform motivation is a vision of learning that helps learners see learning in a different way. Okay? Let's have a look at how we could do this now. And this is where the idea of agentic learning or agentic learning, I think they're pretty much synonymous terms, but agentic learning comes in. So this is a term that, I think sounds quite fancy, doesn't it? Agentic learning. You've probably heard a lot of it before. But the way I see it really is that it's just a way of doing something that we've all enjoyed in the past. Imagining we are special agents on a mission, doing something really important, really daring, really exciting. I don't tell too many people this, but used to like to imagine I was James Bond walking up and down in front of the mirror in my bedroom, turning around and shooting myself. It's a sort of, I suppose, an exciting role. And this is what we need, I think, students to see themselves as. So in practice, what does that mean? Well, it's about purpose. Students must always see themselves as working towards something. All about purpose. If there's purpose, there's a chance to fulfill those needs. The second thing, this is where the gadgets come in, the kind of exploding pens and things, whatever. It's about methods. It's about design thinking. Students have to see themselves as problem solvers, finding new ways of doing things. Assets. Students must think of themselves, I think, as assets in the common struggle for something, the greater good. Students won't do things for themselves often, but for other people they will. Students have to see others as resources that they can access. They're collaborators in the process of learning, and with you, not just with each other. You're all in this together. And finally, easier said than done, but resilience. It's about determination. We must not create a shadow of doubt that students can do this and will get there. There must be no room for doubt to creep in ever. And that's what agentic learning is. So I'm going to show you how this connects then to what we've been talking about in terms of motivation. And we've got, obviously the idea is if it's purposeful, there's a sense that they're meeting needs. They're going to have met a need for being competent or something, but there will be something that met. The sense of equipping yourself is obviously about autonomy. And well, I'll let you read the rest, you can see. But I think what I'd like you to focus on really is this aspect of social learning, the collaboration, the working together with other people. Because I think sometimes it's that we tend to sort of overlook. Students have to see themselves as connected through learning to others. Okay. So before we look at ideas now and start moving on to the sort of main section really, where we look at methods, how we can try and get students to become agentic or to think of themselves as agentic. I'd like you to make some suggestions now. Now, Sean has warned me that the chat box is going to go absolutely nuts in a minute. So, but honestly, I'll try and pick out all the sort of ideas you come up with. What I'd like you to do then is to think all those key aspects of agentic learning that we were talking about just now. So things like purpose. How do we make sure that students are always thinking about purpose as they study? How do we make sure that students are always thinking about solutions, always designing new ways of doing things? That idea of working for the good, with everyone else. How do you do that? How do you get students to feel like they're part of a team? How do you get students also to see others as important parts of that team? And how do we get students also to always be determined, to know that they're going to achieve that purpose? Okay, so I'm just looking at a lot of things popping up now. We've got, can you type something into the chat box? I think this is for now. Yeah, lots of people typing about project-based learning. I'm going to try and scroll down. Projects put it. So brilliant. Responsibility is another keyword that's come up a couple of times. Well, yeah, that's interesting. Encourage them to be themselves. That they're accepted into the group. They don't have to try and be something. I like that. Making them searchers. That's a really good idea. Who was that? Georgia. Robin, inquiry-based. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yes, brilliant. Got smart goals. I like that. Don't ask me exactly. I think specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Thanks, Methchild. Sorry, Metschild. Student-centered lessons. Yeah, putting them in the center. Diane, that looks really interesting. Escape room activities. I'd love to know a bit more about how you do that. Solving real problems coming up a lot. Portfolios. Just engaging, interesting topics, of course. It's going so quick, it's hard to pick up these, but thank you so much for all of these. Keep them coming for a bit. Have you heard the news? Getting them to sort of feel they're finding stuff. We've got brainstorming, that's come up a couple of times. Thanks, Susan, for writing that as well. Jigsaw reading, I like that. So they're all contributing something. Excellent. It's funny, isn't it? We're doing it all, aren't we? We're doing a lot of this. They are blazers, sorry. Shared marks, Maria, that's interesting. Flipped learning, yeah, getting them to do all the work at home. Or not all of it, but a lot of the stuff at home. That's really good. Mission, yeah, using that word, mission, that is really interesting, isn't it? Peer learning. Okay, sorry, I'm just enjoying seeing all these ideas so much. I'm just going to spend a few moments more just to see if there's anything. Task as a secret message, Ava. That sounds fun. Sounds really good. Responsibility. Judith, frame stories. That looks really good as well. Open questions, interaction. Group projects. Make out that they can be the chef. Lahib, yeah. Sort of the creativity comes out there, doesn't it? The idea of you do the recipes. Lots of people say encourage, nurture, and I think that's obviously fundamental, isn't it? Yeah. Drama, role play, so they all play a part in a play. I love that, Matty. Discovery, keyword, whoever typed that was letting them formulate goals. Yeah. Place their inner voice, Maria. That's an interesting idea. Really putting them at the center. Yeah, debates, because they all have to participate, don't they? Field trips do help, don't they? Make people feel so part of something. Such a group sort of bonding thing, isn't it? And VR tours, Shogpan, that's it. Gosh, I wish I had that option. That would be, yeah. Okay. I want to read all of these. It's so frustrating that I can't. Reflective journals, I love. Okay, I am just going to have to I think move on in a minute, but I hope you're enjoying these as well. Yeah, exercise, all that pair work, group work, scavenger hunting. That sounds great. Curriculum. Yeah, flipped classroom is not always working necessarily. I do agree with you there. You've got to have the student first, haven't you, in a way? I think that's the same with all of this. If you don't have a motivated student, how do you give them all these tasks to do? It's a sort of which comes first, isn't it? A chicken or an egg? Very hard. Letting them be in charge. Yeah. That, just to expand on that, I totally agree. It's if most of you all said to me earlier on, well, not most, about 18% of us said disruption is the key thing. How do you give control to a student who is going to disrupt? It's almost like you need that structure and the discipline first before you can then start to give autonomy. It feels like something has to be in place first before you can have these wonderful ideas that you're all coming up with. Susan, choices is a really good one as well, isn't it? Okay. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I do think almost we need to have a session on discipline and sort of boundaries and all that, and perhaps that comes from the top in your school. I don't know if it's like with my school. Certainly you've got to have that kind of structure in place before you can start giving control to students. Okay, Simonette, campus journalism, that's a lovely idea. Getting students to be reporters, to go out and on missions. I love that. Yeah, lots of you really use drama, which is such a collective thing, isn't it? So collaborative. Let them teach. Yeah, wouldn't that be wonderful? Getting students up there teaching. Save us a job. But it's not. Of course, we still have to do a huge amount, but okay. Right. I think you should just run this session. I'd like to spend moments on all of these. I feel quite inadequate compared to all these brilliant ideas. Anyway, all right. Okay, well, I'm going to have to, but thank you so much for all of that. And, I almost think it would be wonderful if you could just spend a few moments just scrolling through. Do feel free to, especially while I suggest some ideas of my own now. I think do spend some time scrolling through and having a look at what some wonderful ideas you've come up with. Okay. Right. So what I'm going to do, I don't pretend for 1 minute that anything I'm just about to show you is anywhere near as good or better than anything you've done. So it's just some more grist to the mill, really. But let's have a look. So quite a few of you then picked up on the idea of missions. And I think that it really is true, actually. It's a sort of, we forget sometimes that, we say, right, next unit, next chapter, we forget the global picture, the big picture. And I think getting them to write in the front of their exercise books what their mission is, I'm going to be an expert user of English for what? What is it? What is this actually all about? So having that there right in the front of their exercise books can't do any harm, can it? And what I would actually do is have a session at the beginning of every week where they think about how what they've learned has contributed to this mission. And the mission could just be getting to the exams at the end of the year. But spending time always going back to the bigger picture, I think that could be really useful. We spend too much time learning stuff, but not enough time, I don't think, thinking about what the purpose of it is. Why are we actually doing this? Connected to that is the idea of, it's the next one. Decision making, anyway. A lot of you said, get them to choose. And I couldn't agree more. Of course, getting them to choose what happens in the classroom is a bit of an issue because it's all going to be, let's watch a video. But I think, getting themselves to set themselves some task that they're going to do in the evening. So a word comes up saying, right, I want everyone to see if you can use it tonight. Come back, let us know how you managed to, if you managed to. I think that's, if they come up with the task, I think that's a really, really good idea. Yeah, go online at some point, not now, please, but Sinek's Golden Circle. So Simon Sinek is actually a business sort of guru, if you like, but he came up with this golden circle concept. We don't tell them what we want them to do first. We first of all tell them the purpose, why they're going to do it. So let's say we're doing the dreaded, present perfect, whatever, get them to imagine first a situation where they might need to talk about their achievements. Maybe it's an interview. Maybe they're trying to impress somebody, whatever. Get them thinking about the situation first. Then say, do you know what? In English, you can't do that without the present perfect. You're going to need it to help you achieve that, because otherwise it sounds like you're telling them a story or whatever, if you use the past tense. Once you've done that, you say, right, I'm going to help you do that. Let's do this exercise. And do you see what I mean? So you're getting them to see a positive vision first before you expect them to actually do what you tell them to do. The golden circle. Think of it as why, how, what objectives, but it's incredibly powerful. A lot of you talked about roles and responsibilities, and especially that idea about drama, literally roles. I couldn't agree more. It just sounds wonderful. I can even see on the screen there, you said play roles. So I think that's absolutely true. It gets each student to do a PowerPoint slide. How many times have you done a presentation when perhaps we could have just said, students, right, you do a word each. So we're doing a vocabulary set here. You take this word, you take that word. I want you to go away, come back. I want you to find sort of, synonyms, antonyms, examples, sentences, whatever, what it rhymes with, all sorts of stuff, and get them to present each word. Or even grammar stuff. Get them to do a kind of find an example of usage. Somebody talked about, I think, journalists, student journalists, get them to go out, investigate, find an example of a grammar structure in the real world, come back and share it. But absolutely, getting them to start taking responsibility. And yeah, there's some silly ones I put on the screen there, picked up from the internet really, but, you know, maybe give someone the job of being the spelling checker. Someone the job of, I don't know, checking attendance, of course, stuff like that. Distributing supplies. The steward gets things on board. Get it? Yeah, and again, with that mission idea, try and keep maybe the idea of, you know, I once did a holiday club when I was younger. We actually called it the Special Agents Club, and we did things like ID cards when students came in. Maybe better for the younger learners, I don't know. But, you know, what about it? Give them a code name with their date of birth, place of training, special skill they can come up with if they like. I love the idea of doing a yearbook for students as well before they start, so they all feel that everyone knows their special experiences and abilities. Their learning history, experience, how many books they read in English, how many games they can play using English. But a lot of you said student centre, putting students in the centre. I think that's what this is about. So many times, actually, as a teacher, at the end of the course, students say, oh, you know, I'm a professional, I've done ballet for my country or something, or show jumping. And I think, gosh, why didn't I ask that? Why didn't I know what it was that made you who you are, you know, give you your identity? We need to do that first, don't we, I think? Especially with regard to what they can already do in English. And then they won't feel the need, think this isn't relevant. They'll think, well, the teacher knows me, it's fine. This idea about time to strive is something that, you know, we talked about determination, and we mentioned that, you know, you've got to show students that you believe they can achieve. There must be no doubt that they're not good enough. And I was just observing one of my teachers the other day, actually, who said, what did they say? They asked a question, the student didn't get it, and they said, anyone else can help? And I think, you know, there has to be that time. We've got to show we believe in students, you know, give them a few seconds, let them come up with the ideas, just so we're constantly reinforcing that idea that you're going to do it. I know you are. Anyway, if we do need to, we can say, well, we'll come back. I'm going to ask another question, then I'll come back to you, see if you can have a go. Yeah, I like the idea like spies would, maybe a checklist, to-do list, that sort of thing. It creates a real focus, doesn't it? And yes, achievement. Proximal goals, short-term learning, you know, things that they can tick all the time, shows real sense of progress. Some of you mentioned, I think, did someone mention, I think, passports or stamps, or the idea of a kind of, you know, these are the things I've achieved. And of course, someone said virtual reality back then, didn't they? Yeah, self-access. If we can get them trying to access resources themselves, even if not in school, but outside. A lot of you mentioned flipped learning as well, and how that could work in some cases. How motivating is it to sort of feel in control, that autonomy? And finally, yeah, again, something I think a lot of people mention, the problem-solving approach. Getting them to think of a challenge that they can solve. So one example, perhaps they're chatting online and someone says, you know, what's that? So how should we respond? Let's get into groups, work out what's the best way of responding. Yeah. Or we did less well than we hoped in the test. How can we do better next time? What can we do? Right, groups. I want ideas. Yeah, get them on a mission, get them solving things. Often called design thinking. Okay, now almost come to the end of what I wanted to sort of suggest or go through with you. But what I'd like to do is to sort of suggest to you that, because I haven't really laid this out in a very clear staged way, I must admit, it's a sort of collection of ideas. But I'd like us all, if possible, to perhaps try this approach maybe next week when we go back, in our case anyway, or perhaps when you go back to school after the weekend. And it does take time, I think, to reorganize programs to do this. But what I've been doing is making sure that the first half an hour of the whole week is all about the mission statements and objective setting, about working out how students feel, how much progress they feel they made the week before towards that mission in English, and how much more they feel they need to do, what didn't work, what they'd like to do again. But spend time reflecting on that at the beginning of each week. So the first stage, yes, it's sort of 5-stage process, really. So first of all, the mission, okay? The second stage, which I think we should, well, I've been trying to do anyway, is the idea of setting objectives. Obviously, they have to be smart, as someone said. They have to be differentiated. You know, we can't expect everyone to do the same. But that's why that control comes in. Let students sort of think about how much they think they need to get. Do a test at the end of the week. What percentage should they be aiming for? Or, you know, how many words did they think would be appropriate for them to learn? But spend time setting objectives for the week. And the more work we do upstream in sort of focusing their minds, I think the greater sense of purpose and motivation will emerge. After we've done that, I think we have to move on to the problem solving stage. And I think rather than us thinking we know what's best for the students, we know what they should be doing, let's just, and we probably do, to be fair, don't we? We should do, shouldn't we? But at least make it feel like it comes from them, so that they perhaps think, well, I've got this book that is great, or I've got this, I know this song that has that structure, or I know this, let's see what they can bring to the table. And talking of tables, by the way, if anyone's interested in the Harkness method as a way of learning, if you've got slightly fewer students, gathering them around a sort of table, getting them to sort of take the lead as if they're having a headquarters sort of meeting. It's a fantastic way of getting them feeling responsible. But yeah, the idea of spending time, even if you've got backup ideas, make sure that they feel they are leading the process of solving problems. So after the problem solving, an assigning stage where you get students to take on the roles. Okay, so we looked at sort of classroom roles before, and you know, getting students to think what can they do, what particular expertise or experience they have. And finally, how we're going to get them to show it, all right, at the end of the week's learning. So what kind of assessments or tasks we can set for them to get them to prove what they've managed to do. It could be a performance. I think that's a lovely idea. It could simply be a simple test. I tend to have a sort of knowledge test with my students towards the middle point of the week, actually. We sort of do knowledge first and then move on to skills in a sort of process like that. But having some sort of test in the middle where, you know, they feel like they can show what they've managed to achieve, and then some sort of skills assessment at the end, which could be in the form of a play, presentation or something, but giving them that chance to achieve. So I haven't put this up on the slide, so I apologize for that, but 5 stages, I'm just going to go through them again. Mission first, objectives, problem solving, assigning roles, and then showing what they've achieved, what they can do. So I don't know, what does that mean? MOPAS, it says, doesn't it? Mission, objectives, problem solving, assigning stages, and showing. Okay, well, that time, well, we flew through the slides there. I hope I didn't rush or spend too little time on any of that, but I think now I'm ready to open the presentation to your questions. All right.
So if you click on the Q&A tab, Nick, there are some questions already there, and I'm sure others will be written there.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Can you see them?
Yeah, let me just scroll up to the top because it's
Yeah, just a reminder, if you do have a question for Nick, drop it into the Q&A tab, which is where he's now looking, and hopefully he'll have time to answer it.
Okay, so the first question I've got here is Wiswana, who asked how to motivate with a single student. Yeah, so obviously Wiswana, you're thinking this whole idea of collaboration and being part of a group, being an asset, it's not so easy, is it, when you've got one single student? But I suppose they're in a collaborative journey with you, in a way. I wonder if you could still do the same process, but instead get them to maybe think about their social networks that they have, get them to come up with the ideas, perhaps get them to set themselves objectives and targets, what they would like to have achieved each week. Anyway, it's a good point, good challenge to think about that. Thanks, Rizwana. Sandys, let's have a quick look. You've said, and this was, Manuel and Sandys, when both students have good skills for doing the tasks, the interaction would be easy. But what do we do when it's not that way? How can students favour the interaction then? Sort of support interaction. Yeah, and this is, I think, similar to what we were saying with the structure and the discipline, isn't it? How do you get students to become agentic if they don't actually have those sort of many skills in the first place? And I think you've got a second point here. How can we know that creating inclusive and understanding classroom where the students have problems to build up their knowledge? So it sounds like you've got a high proportion of SEND students perhaps in that setting, and a real lack of confidence. And I think this is a huge issue with English when the expectation is very high. I've had very low-level learners trying to do IELTS before, and goodness me, they will always feel discouraged because we're expecting them to do far more than they should be doing. Young age as well. I still think we can start. Sorry, that's Hannah. Let's just finish with some of those questions first. I think it has to be grading, doesn't it? Starting somewhere with the task that's, a first step, and whether that's even non-language. I think even if you start saying, right, forget the language skills, let's do classroom management. Who's going to help me with the desk? Who's going to help? Where should this desk go? Who's going to help with the pencils type thing? So steps that aren't necessarily language based, but are part of a kind of classroom management. And so that we get them participating right from the get-go. Anyway, it's a really good question. I hope some of those suggestions sort of helped. Let's have a quick look at Hannah. At what age can we introduce our learners, so second language learners, to be agents and take a role in their learning, especially when they're young? Yeah, I think younger the better, isn't it? I know they tend to be more sort of just interested in following at a very young age. So it's a very good point. I tend to think motivation is, can seem like less of a challenge, and maybe we neglect it when they're younger more than we should. But I think trying to get them to take responsibility, even at a young age, is important. And I think, obviously there are limits to their skills. We can't expect them to do flipped learning, go away and sort of, look at presentations, design slides themselves. But I think, in the classroom, if rather than saying we are going to do this now, talking about, why we're doing it, what we're hoping to get out of it, and then maybe, ask them, what do you think? What do you think we should do? Anyway, Hannah, thanks very much for that question. I'm going to go down a bit now to Fiona. What about teachers' charisma? Yeah, and rapport for students. It's true, isn't it? Sometimes at the end of the day, either you've got that sort of ability to relate to students and inspire, lead them, or not. But I think I've seen a lot of teachers get students and use their charisma, get sort of champions, give particular roles to students who are great at leading, and see if you can get them on board so that, you know, we use their leadership skills and sort of co-opt them into the learning process. So I think that's something I would do. I don't know if you can teach charisma and personality skills, but to be honest, you know, I think if we show that we are interested in investing in students, they will feel that we are sort of on their side. And I think one route to actually gaining that rapport with the students is actually being willing to try and give a little bit of control to them. I think that gets paid back in trust. Okay, we've dealt with the issue of elementary students a little bit as well, but a lot of you concerned with that. And I think it's really good questions. It would be great to have a session, wouldn't it, especially on that. But I don't see why not. I do think we could make this work, as I say, in small steps, find one or two things we can do, especially the mission statements, the sort of ID cards, that sort of thing. Yeah. Demotivation. This is the thing I was studying, wasn't it? How do you keep motivation level throughout the year? It's easy at the beginning, but motivation breaks during the year. It totally does. Yeah, Liliana, it's a really good question. I tend to think that often happens when students feel a bit lost, like they think, what have I achieved? What have I done? This wasn't what I was hoping it would be. And I think it tends to be a question of revisiting that mission, keeping that checklist at the beginning. I mean, with my students, I've got weekly objectives, which I distribute to them at the beginning so that they check off those objectives as they sort of go through the term, and they can see the end getting closer and closer. And I put the kind of I said quizzes, results, the sort of like, you know, Kahoots often, but sometimes in forms. And I get them to put in their record, like what percentage they got in the vocabulary quiz. And then towards the end of the term, they can start seeing progress perhaps, or improvement. I think the danger can be where they start to lose sense of the overall syllabus and scheme. What was the purpose? What are we here again? And we can often, I think, feel perhaps they feel that they need to reset and revisit the overall purpose. So I totally agree that's a big issue, but I think we have to have the courage to get out of a rut. Sometimes I get into habits all the time as a teacher and find myself doing the same things. But to say, no, this isn't working. We need to do things differently, and we're going to this week. I want you to tell me why you're not feeling fantastic at the moment. Why is your motivation level dropping? And just, I think, have the confidence to say, time out. You're not benefiting as much as you need to. Let's try things differently. Anyway, it's a really incredibly important point. All right. Let's have a look. Rasha, can we apply this with large classes and young learners? Large classes are such an issue, aren't they? But yes, I think most of you said project work, which of course is great for large classes, isn't it? As long as we've clearly defined the roles, get them split up into projects. I do think that's it's perfectly doable. What other challenges would there be in large classes? Yeah, obviously, I think when there is a large class, the temptation is that we tend to take control more. I do. I panic a bit and think, oh, I must just be really energetic and lively and keep their focus on me, which is the wrong way, isn't it? That's not the way to motivate. Or to make them feel autonomous. So I think trusting by designing the groups, perhaps, and clearly defining the tasks and explaining why they're doing the tasks, I'd like to think that we could make this work with larger classes as well. But I do admit you can't be quite so flexible, hey, what should we do kind of thing. You've got to be a little bit more prescriptive, or at least clear in what objectives you want them to work towards. I wonder if differentiation is a key there as well. Getting each group to define. We don't want to stream students really, do we? But perhaps that would help as well. Diane, how do you allocate for the silent, quiet student? Yes, absolutely. Getting them talking. Yeah, the painfully shy student. And you're right, so many expect us to sort of do it all. I think it's often a cultural expectation as well. I have lots of students often from sort of the far east or sort of East Asia who do tend to expect, I think, the teacher to take a fuller role. And if you said, well, what do you think? They would say, well, hang on, this is, I'm not getting paid for this. This is you. So I think that could be an issue as well. So I think it would have to be explained perhaps why this is being done. But I think the silent students, if we do put them into groups or pairs, then what I've done in the past is just sort of left the room slightly, or to sort of try and make myself less prominent so that perhaps they feel they can come out a little bit. As I said, getting them to sit around a table and you walking around the back of them, for example, so they think, well, I've got no choice. I absolutely have to say something here. Let's move on a little bit more. Okay. All right. Yeah, and Ali G, you're talking about the shyness as well, weren't you? 50 students overshadowed by the loud ones. How do I encourage them to answer without discouraging the loud ones? That's right. We don't want to. I think it's that responsibility. I would say give the loud ones responsibility towards the weaker ones. Very often the loud ones just want you to know that they know. If you trust, I suppose, if we said to them, you've got so much to offer. Now there's one or two students that could benefit from your skills or whatever. Can we find a way of getting them to work with the weaker ones, getting them to become teachers? I think that might work. So give the louder ones some sort of perhaps responsibility towards the others. I hope that helps, Ali. That's a really good point. Okay, just scrolling down, see if any more. Nick, can you repeat the 5 stages again? Yeah, I'm so sorry. It should have been on the screen. It was one of those last minute things, and I thought, yeah, it'd be good to try and think. So the 5 stages, I think spending time at the beginning of the week looking at the overall mission, what we're trying to achieve. Then moving on to specific objectives, getting them to set objectives that they want to achieve. So it's the mission, objectives, then problem solving, telling them, like, this is what we've got to do, guys. How do you think we should do it? And getting them to suggest ideas. Once we've done that, assigning roles to students. What do you think you could bring to this? Getting them to come up with, take responsibility. And then the key thing as a teacher, which I don't think we do enough, but giving them the opportunity to show what they've achieved. And that often means flipping classes, because it's in the classroom that you have to show and demonstrate learning. You've got to be present and give equal time for everyone to demonstrate something. So I think, using the class time to show what they've achieved. And I would say that is a week of learning. Doing that sort of across a weekly or even 2 weekly cycle, if your school has a sort of A/B timetable system. But setting objectives that span more than one lesson, so that they do feel they've got that sense of project, sense of mission, working towards an objective. But I think you can't really do that easily in one lesson. You could do, but I just think doing it across a week works for me. Anyway, I hope that, that was clear enough, Cooper. Thank you for prompting that again.
I would say you've got time for about 2 more questions, Nick, depending on the length of your answers, of course. But a couple more.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks so much. Lara, you've asked Nick, how do you motivate students with bad experience in English class? Yes, totally. And, we do have these students, don't we, who will not cooperate with you, who will just disrupt and not behave. And I think it's a slow process of earning trust. I really do think they won't believe if you say, we're on your side, it's just for you. I think there has to be a way of letting them express those ideas first, express their feelings, and and then trying to, I don't know, someone mentioned actually a thing about what was it about, if students have a low level and they're not really kind of engaged with English and can't really do much. And I've got a teacher friend who does special education needs, and they don't work on the English sort of first of all. They sort of do things like what do they do? A sort of raffle in the class, and they bring in like a thing of Pringles, and they do a whole raffle each lesson type thing, or once a week. Those students who kind of, and it's funny, they all want to get the Pringles. I mean, it's just Pringles, but for some reason that is entirely relatable. Now, it's not intrinsic motivation, I know, but I think starting by getting to their level, finding something, a hook, to gain their trust a bit, to make it clear that they think, okay, maybe the teacher does kind of get me a little bit, and not to run before you can walk. So finding something, I think, that will engage, before we get on to the actual English learning, I think. All right. Now, I think that's it. Now, Sean, can you still hear me?
Of course.
Yep. Sorry, I just had my screen suddenly went blank.
Oh, did it? Oh, it's nothing to do with me.
Yeah,
That's
anyway,
your connection.
As long as you can say
it's still broadcasting.
Should I wind up now? Because there's
if you can't see any more questions, then it makes sense. Yeah, I know you've got a couple of slides left.
I think, well, we're basically finished.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's just okay. I'll wrap it up in a sec then. Sorry, guys, if you've written questions and I haven't managed to get onto them. I'm so sorry. It would be lovely to spend more time, but there are actually loads of really, really good questions here. So anyway, I do apologise for not managing to get through many. Anyway, right. Well, that's all I wanted to sort of say today. If you want some further ideas, I say the book I wrote on motivation, called Motivational Teaching, is available, and it's a sort of recipe book. It's got lots of sort of ideas which I found worked, and some ideas which perhaps sort of less usual, and including but a lot of sort of crucial ones as well. So I do urge you, if you do want a bit more things to stimulate some thoughts, then that is available. Anyway, that is everything. Thank you guys so much. It's been a real privilege to speak with so many people, and so many people with such amazing sort of selection of ideas. So thank you very much indeed. And I wish you all the best with whatever ideas you decide to take forward and try with your class. If you can let me know how they go, I would love to find out. All right. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much, Nick.